Let your mind enter into stillness as I read these words by Gary Kowalski. Our time is short here on earth. Around us swirl immensities of time and space. A universe infinite in all directions. How small our hopes and cares seem amid the panorama of connection. Yet we are not separate from the cosmos, but have evolved and grown out of it, like the leaves of a tree or the waves upon the sea. And our thoughts are it thoughts, our lives a manifestation of our never-ending vitality. Our spirits a microcosm of the beauty and creativity of the whole. Fill us then with reverence and compassion for all who are our kin, cloud and sun, sibling and cousin, the multitude of beings who share this improbable and never to be repeated moment. All expressions, like ourselves, of the mind at large, the spirit at play, the dynamism at work, in whom we live and move, and whom we will never know. Not every story was told in its time. Not every life was lived in the open. There have always been people who knew something true about themselves that the world was not ready to receive. So they learned to live in the quiet spaces, inside careful conversations, inside long silences, inside lives shaped as much by what could not be said as by what could. They made meaning in the margins. They built lives out of what was possible, even when it came at a cost we may never fully see. Long before pride filled the streets with color and music and bodies moving freely in the light, there were those who carried their truth without witness. They gathered where they could, moved through their days holding something sacred and fragile, something that had no safe place to land. Some spoke in coded language. Some found one or two people they could trust. Some never spoke at all. And still they lived. Still they loved. Still they remained within families, within communities, within faith traditions that could not fully hold them. It would be easy to tell the story only as silence, of absence or loss. But silence is not the same as emptiness. What they carried required a kind of courage that rarely gets named. The courage to remain, the courage to endure, the courage to hold on to something true, without any guarantee that it would ever be seen or blessed. And somehow, across time, that truth was not lost. It moved quietly forward, shaping a path that others would one day be able to walk more openly. We are walking that path now. And beneath that inheritance is a question that does not go away. Not only what was hidden, but what was carried forward, and who is still waiting, even now, for that same freedom to reach them. And for many people, that risk was not abstract. It shaped the choices they made every day. For some, it meant watching from a distance, hearing about pride in another city, and imagining what it might feel like to be there, while knowing that being seen in that kind of space could change everything. In large urban areas, there was sometimes a kind of anonymity, a way to disappear into the crowd, to take the risk of being present without being fully known. But in smaller towns, in rural communities, where names are known and stories travel quickly, visibility carried a different kind of weight. To be seen could mean being recognized, and to be recognized could mean being questioned or judged or quietly excluded. It could mean a conversation at work that never quite recovers, a shift in how a family looks at you, a door in the faith community that doesn't fully close, but doesn't open the same way again. For some, those small shifts were only the beginning. A conversation that didn't recover could become a job that didn't last. A change in how a family looked at you could become distance or silence or the quiet breaking of relationship. In some places, being known in that way could bring not just judgment, but real danger. Legal consequences, forced treatment, the loss of home, the loss of safety in one's own body. People understood those risks, even if they were never spoken aloud. They didn't need to be explained. They lived in the background of every decision, every hesitation, every moment of choosing whether to be seen or to remain hidden. For me, this isn't only history. I've known these people, and I was one of them. People who made those quiet calculations about what was safe and what was not. For some, those calculations are still being made, not in history books or in distant places, but in the lives of young people today. There are queer youth, many of them in their teens and early 20s, barely older than JAJ, who are growing up in faith communities where they are taught, directly or indirectly, that who they are and what they believe cannot fully belong together. They are asked in ways both subtle and explicit to choose between their identity and their spirituality, between honesty and belonging, between being fully known and being safe. And many of them are still learning to live in those quiet spaces, measuring their words, watching who they trust, deciding what parts of themselves can be shared and what must remain hidden. The questions may sound different now. The language may have changed, but the underlying tension is painfully familiar. What will it cost me to be seen? Across faith traditions, there are communities working to change that reality. Beloved Arise is one of those communities. They exist because too many young people have been told, in one way or another, that their queerness makes them incompatible with faith. And they exist to say something different, that there is nothing about who you are that separates you from the sacred, and nothing about your identity that places you outside of the circle of belonging. For many queer youth, faith still matters deeply. And yet too often, the spaces that should offer meaning and connection instead become sources of shame or fear. The consequences of that are not abstract. They show up in isolation, in disconnection, in the quiet erosion of a young person's sense of worth and possibility. When a young person is made to feel that they must choose between being loved and being honest, the cost of that choice can be devastating. And the truth is, it doesn't take much to begin to change that. One adult who sees them, one community that makes room, one place where they do not have to edit themselves in order to belong. This is the work that Beloved Arise is doing, creating networks of communities where queer youth of faith can find connection, affirmation, and safety without having to choose between who they are and what they believe. And it is work that this congregation has been quietly, steadily moving toward. For the past 2 years, our LGBTQ social action group has been building relationships, asking questions, and doing the careful work of becoming a place where that kind of belonging is not just something we say, but something we can offer. And now we have been accepted into that network. We are included on their community map of queer-affirming faith spaces, places that young people can find when they are searching for somewhere to go, somewhere to be known, somewhere to begin again. That matters more than we might immediately realize. Because there are still young people, many of them not far from here, who are being told in ways large and small that they do not belong. Young people who are navigating rejection, not only from their faith communities, but sometimes from their families as well. Young people who are still being asked to choose between their queerness and their spirituality, and who are looking, sometimes quietly, sometimes desperately, for a place where that choice is no longer required. And what we are saying by stepping into this work is that such a place exists. Not somewhere far away, not only in large cities, but here. And not only for the young. There are also those who have lived long lives without ever knowing what it feels like to be fully welcomed in a space of faith. People who have carried the same carefulness for decades, who have learned over time how to separate parts of themselves in order to remain connected to something sacred. And sometimes, later in life, they walk into a place like this for the first time, without fear, without needing to edit themselves, without the quiet undercurrent of shame, and something shifts. Not because they have changed, but because the space around them has. That kind of belonging is not small. It is not symbolic. It is real, and it matters. Pride has not always been what we experience it as today. It began as a march for dignity, for safety, for the right to exist in public space. Over time, in some places, it took on the shape of a parade. Music, floats, celebration in the open. And now, in many communities, such as ours, it is returning again to something closer to a march. As new generations continue to claim their rights and their visibility. All these forms hold meaning. The joy matters. The celebration matters. It is hard-won, and it is not separate from what came before it, but born from it. Because pride exists, in part because there were people whose lives were never fully seen, not just unnamed, but often unknown in the deepest sense. People who learned early the cost of being visible and shaped their lives around that knowledge. People who moved carefully through the world, who held something true about themselves without any assurance it would ever be welcomed. Some loved quietly in ways that could not be spoken. Some carried that truth alone. What they held was real, even when it had no place to be named. And what they endured did not disappear. It made something possible. To stand in that kind of public space, together, visibly, is not only expression, but a kind of truth-telling. It is a way of saying that these lives, these identities, these relationships are not meant to be hidden away or held quietly at the edges. It is a way of making space, not only for ourselves, but for others who are still wondering if such space exists. And for those of us who can show up, who can stand in that kind of openness without fear of losing everything, our presence carries meaning beyond our own experience. It becomes a way of honoring those who could not be visible, whose lives were shaped by what it was cost to be seen. And it became a signal to someone else, someone watching from a distance, someone still making those quiet calculations, that there are places in this world where they might be known and still be safe. We know that even one accepting adult in the life of a queer young person can make a profound difference. It can lower the risk of suicide, increase the possibility of connection, and create space for a future that might not have felt possible before. That kind of presence does not require perfection. It does not require having all the right words. It simply requires showing up in a way that says, you are not alone, and you do not have to choose between who you are and being loved. And so when we consider Pride, not just as an event, but as a practice, we might ask ourselves not only whether we will attend, but how we will be present. What it means to stand in that space with intention. What it means to carry forward something that was once hidden, and to do so in a way that makes more room for those who are still waiting. We do not walk this path alone. We walk it with those whose names we may never know. Those who learned early what it cost to be seen and shaped their lives around that knowledge. Those who carried something true without any assurance it would be welcomed. Those who loved and believed and endured in ways that were not always visible, but were no less real. What they carried did not disappear. It moved forward quietly until it reached us. We walk, too, alongside those who are still finding their way, those who are asking even now what it will cost to be honest about who they are, those who are asking and wondering if there is a place where they can be fully known and still belong. Their lives are not distant from ours. Their questions are not theoretical. They are part of the same story, still unfolding, still asking something of us. And so the question is not only what has been handed to us, but what will we do with it? Not only what was hidden, but what we are willing to make visible. Not only who walked before us, but how we will walk now. For some of us, that may mean showing up at Pride, not only as celebration, but as witness, as a way of honoring those who could not be there, and standing in whatever ways we can with those who could not yet be. A way of saying with our presence that there are places in this world where people can be known and still be safe. And beyond any single event, the invitation is larger. To be the kind of community where no one has to choose between who they are and being loved. To be the kind of people who make room for truth, for complexity, for lives still becoming. As we go from here, may we carry that forward, not perfectly, but intentionally, not loudly, but faithfully, remembering that we are not only walking into the future, we are walking with all of those who made the path and all of those who are still searching for it.